So today we're continuing 5.1 about perpendicular and angle bisectors. We just talked about how we are going to write an equation in point slope form, which is this form of the perpendicular bisector with the segment that has these two endpoints. And we are all right now graphing. So we're making our grid. I'm plotting my points. So 5, 2, and 1, -4. And then go ahead and label your points with their names. And these are C and D, so I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up 1, 2. And that is C. And then for D, over 1, down 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the perpendicular bisector means two things. So obviously if it's perpendicular, yes, it's going to intersect in a right angle. But Ireland, will you tell us one more time what you said that we know about the slopes of perpendicular lines?
If the product of their slopes is equal to 1.
Yes, so you can tell by the slopes if they're perpendicular because their product is going to be -1. So we are going to need to use the slope to get the perpendicular part. And then what about a bisector? Ziggy, what does a bisector do? Yeah, splits the segment in half, right? So is there a certain something that I could put on here that's going to split this in half?
Midpoint.
Yeah, good. So that's what we're going to do first. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is find the midpoint of CD. Okay, and please make sure you're writing down your steps just as I have them here. Okay, so we need to find the midpoint of CD. This is because it's a bisector. Cuts in half. And if it's a bisector that cuts it in half, we can find the halfway point by finding the midpoint. So I'm just going to remind you of what your equation is for that. It's x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and then it is y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Basically what you're doing is you're taking the averages of these 2 points. Okay, so for point C, 5, 2, this is your x1 and your y1. D is your x2 and y2. Okay, so when I say that we're taking the average, we're just adding the two x's together and then dividing it by 2. Okay, so this would be 5 plus 1 divided by 2. The y's would be 2 plus -4 divided by 2. So 5 plus 1 is going to be 6. 6 divided by 2 would be 3. So this will simplify to 3. 2 plus -4 is -2. -2 divided by 2, -1. Okay, so this is the midpoint. Okay, so let's go ahead and find that on our graph. So over 1, 2, 3, down -1. If you used a straight edge, can you see how exact it is? It's pretty nice. Okay, I'm just going to call this M for the midpoint. All right, and then step 2, we want to find the slope. Okay, so if we're going to find the slope of the perpendicular bisector, we have to remember if two lines are perpendicular, then the product of their slopes is equal to -1. Do you guys remember another way that we said that too? Yeah. Good, yes, they're opposite reciprocals. So the opposite part just refers to if it's positive or negative. Okay, the reciprocal is going to be like over 1 or the flip of the fraction. So reciprocal is over 1, or you flip the fraction. So in order to do this, we have to find the slope of your segment. Okay, so we are going to find the slope of the segment CD. Do you guys remember how to find the slope?
y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1.
Good. Okay, so your slope equation is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And again, your C and your D, you can use these same ones here. I just wrote them out again. All right, so then your slope is going to be -4 minus 2 over 1 minus 5. So -4 minus 2 is -6, 1 minus 5, -4. Now, if you have a negative on the top and the bottom, you can simplify that, and you need to a positive. The negative divided by a negative will be a positive. You also need to reduce. So what number goes into 6 and 4? 2. So if you divide them each by 2, you will get a positive 3 over 2. Okay, so remember, this is the slope of the segment. So now we can take this and find the slope of the perpendicular bisector. So there's a couple different ways that you can think of it. You can do the opposite reciprocal, or you can ask yourself, okay, what would I multiply by to get -1? So what would I multiply 3 over 2 by to get -1? I think it's simpler to just do the opposite reciprocal. So when it's opposite, you're just going to switch the sign. Okay, so is this positive or negative? That's positive, so if I switch it, it has to be what? So I'm just going to write this is the slope of the perpendicular bisector. Okay, so if this is positive, I know the slope has to be negative here. And then we talked about if it's the reciprocal, you're going to flip the fraction. If it's not a fraction, what do? Nope. If it's not a fraction, you put it over 1. So if it's not a fraction, so if it's a whole number, under 1. Okay, so like for an example, if it was 3, then you would write 1/3, right, would be the reciprocal. If it was 4, what would the reciprocal be? 1/4, right? If it was 20, the reciprocal would be 1 over 20. Okay, so if it's a whole number, then you're just going to put it over 1. Maybe we should do a little example. So for example, if your slope is 3, the reciprocal is 1/3. Okay, that's not the opposite reciprocal, just the reciprocal. So the slope of your bisector, if you have 3/2, we can flip that and it would be 2/3. So this is the slope of your perpendicular bisector. All right, now we can go ahead and we can write our equation, and that is our step 3. Okay, so write equation of the perpendicular bisector using the midpoint from step 1 and the slope from step 2. So from step 1, we found the midpoint, which is a point, was 3, -1. This is a point on the perpendicular bisector. What one is the slope of the perpendicular bisector? The -2/3, right? This was the slope of our equation, our original segment. This is the slope of our perpendicular bisector. So now, when I'm plugging this into the equation, y minus y1 equals mx minus x1, I'm going to keep it as y minus, this is my x1 and y1 now, so y minus -1, which I'll simplify in a second, -2/3, x minus 3. If you have minus and negative, you do need to go ahead and change that. Okay, and then we can check that we have this line using the slope. If we use -2/3 to find our other point, you could just go down 1, 2, right 1, 2, 3. You could go up 1, 2, and then you'd have to go left 1, 2, 3. Okay, and this line here that we just constructed is the perpendicular bisector. All right, so that line should match this picture here. Okay, so your homework / classwork is a 5.1 packet that I have for you. But before I give you that, we are going to go over your